not be able to
Sorry.
attend. So at 10:03, I'll call this in order. And the first thing I'd like to do is, to approve the minutes of November 9th. Before that, I would like to entertain a motion to include also the 11/29 special meeting minutes, which were sent out to us yesterday.
So moved to approve.
Okay, do we have a second?
Are we approving putting it on the agenda or the minutes?
We're approving putting it on the agenda.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. It's on the agenda, so we have, first item is to approve the minutes of the November 9th, 2021 board meeting and the special meeting of November 29th, starting with the first regular meeting on November 9th. Does anybody have any suggestions of corrections, additions, deletions, etc.?
No.
Okay. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the 9th.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, second.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
John, this is Pete. I'm abstaining because I wasn't at the meeting.
Correct. Very good. Okay. The motion is carried with one abstention. The second, moving on to the minutes of the 11/29 special meeting. I did hear that there were some additions, if we could bring them to light now, or corrections.
So we changed the order of that meeting. So KPMG was last and
Last.
I had to leave at 11 o'clock. So I was not there for the KPMG. That it says it was unanimously approved, and it seems to make it sound like I approved it as well. Not that I wouldn't have approved it, but I was not there.
Correct.
And I was also not there, John, for that part of the meeting.
Yep, you should note
Correct.
that
Okay.
Tim
Yep.
was not there and has recused himself. Any further corrections, additions, deletions? Okay, hearing none, entertain a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
I'll make that motion.
Second,
I'll second.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. Okay, old business. We do have a first run of comments and concerns, and Bonnie did send a map and a request, and she also Q&A chatted it to us. So we'll take this opportunity, Bonnie, if you want to address it.
Yes, thank you. So at the last meeting, there was discussion about the experience required, as well as the verification process for CPA candidates. And Connecticut currently is an outlier when it comes to our experience requirements and verification. So under the Uniform Accountancy Act, it says that an applicant for initial issuance of a certificate has to have 1 year experience, not 2. And in terms of the verification, it only need be verified by a licensee, so by a certified public accountant. We don't have either of those in place. Right now, we are one of, I believe it is 6 states, but you should have the maps in front of you. We're one of 6 states that has a 2-year requirement. And some states have changed recently, but for the most part, They've been 1 year for quite a while. So I would recommend.
I actually read it. We read it yesterday, and I believe it's a 3-year requirement, not 2, but whatever.
Oh, you're right.
More
I'm
than
sorry,
one.
no, it is 2. It was 3 years
Two.
for whatever the break was before the law changed. I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding.
So, so making it 1 year is something that I would suggest would benefit Connecticut, because right now people can go to another state and get their license with only 1 year. The other thing is, and this has come up in several meetings, right now, the way our law is worded, you have to work under a CPA in order for them to verify that you've gained your experience. And that's unusual as well, and not required by the UAA either. They just require that it be certified by a CPA. And the reason for this is because you have some people that work in industry that don't work directly underneath a CPA, but may have a CPA that they work with, whether it be an accounting firm or in another department. And as we are trying to actually increase the number of CPAs as the pipeline is shrinking, this is another thing that discourages people from actually becoming a CPA in Connecticut. And we've had CFOs before apply for their CPA license in Connecticut, but they've been turned down because they use an accounting firm they've worked with as opposed to working under. But the CFO is not going to work under a CPA in very few exceptions. And the only time that's going to happen is when the CEO is a certified public accountant. So I would ask that you make those 2 changes. And I know it has to go through the regulatory process, but to bring us more in line with other states and definitely help us in terms of CPA evolution and the pipeline. You can see from those 2 maps that, again, we're outliers. And I apologize, I'm not going to give you the numbers, but if you just look at the map, you can see, because I can't remember how many states versus other jurisdictions. But I think for the verification, it's 33 states and 36 jurisdictions allow a verification by a CPA, any CPA. And I know that we're one of 6 states in terms of not allowing or requiring more than 1 year experience. So again, my request is those 2 modifications.
Well, if you don't mind, I just as soon defer this, because that is something that actually was intended to be brought up on this agenda farther down when it comes to alternative experience, and it relates to that. And okay.
Yes.
Okay, going on to old business, legislative update.
Okay, I guess that's me. Excuse me, I have nothing too new other than that let me see, I did get an email update yesterday on our legislation. And where is it? Okay. We have included in our proposed legislative package a change to section 16 of the Public Act 21-27 that just came through. The proposed amendment would exempt licensees under Chapter 389, which are the CPAs, from complying with the new continuing education deadline for 3 months prior to renewal. Instead, leave the CE period where it was prior to the passage of that, which so it would not change the CE year, assuming this change does take place. There would just be there would be no change, and because we treated last year as if there was no change because the revision went into effect October 1st, it would really be transparent to all the licensees. They would never even be aware that, unless they follow the legislation, that anything really had changed. So hopefully that'll get through, and then we'll just stay on the July to June CE year.
Any comments, questions for Frank? That is the shortest legislative update we've had in 2 or 3 years, I think.
Because it's the only thing I'm aware of, unless the society has put anything in that we don't know about.
You don't have anything in on any licensure, et cetera, requirements, only tax issues.
Okay. Okay, going on to alternative experience. Just for just so that the history on this is on the agenda for two significant reasons. One is the request of under the travelers program, and the other is initially a request for acceptance of alternative experience by David Katz, who had put us an exceptional amount of time in an effort to meet all the requirements, and his issue was working for an organization that, like your example of the CFO, would not be under the supervision of a CPA. And we had a presentation by NASBA on their alternative, which I believe our statutes and regulations allow us to consider. And Frank and Kat, I think, are a little better positioned to answer that. And a lot of discussion on exactly what the requirements should be and what sort of alternative experience can be accepted. And that's what we want to do here. I don't know whether the best thing to do is since we have a guest here from Travelers, is to address that first so that he can get on with his day. That's but you know, we have made an exception. When I was going to grad school, my professor was one of the top, known nationally and internationally as one of the top men in the profession, was not a CPA because he did not have experience auditing and being a CPA, and never worked for a CPA firm. Now we have a special exception for academics in our statutes. So I think, given that our prime view is protection of the public, that should be the lens with which we look, and is it appropriate to, or how is it appropriate? And I believe, and Kat, or Frank, I'd like you to address this one thing. There is a section that really does allow us to consider alternatives, and we should have some policies on what alternatives we might accept and how we would go about doing that. But first, I think that we should hit the Travelers program. And is there anybody that after, I think there was a presentation last time, and I don't know whether, were you, Marcia, were you still here for that one?
Yes, I was, because we did that
Okay.
first.
So I think everybody on was still here. And the process is, if anybody would like to comment in, including Mr. Riley and our legal counsel, et cetera, I'll open the floor.
If I could, I'll just help break the ice and maybe get us back, you know, and I know it was a while ago that we talked, but just as a refresher, we have a program for our young professionals that we hire out of college. Typically, we had focused on finance majors. However, we have shifted most recently to accounting majors. One of the challenges with the accounting majors is they would still like to obtain their certification, their CPA. And so we run all of our participants in this program through a 3-year program, 3 one-year rotations, working for various managers and supervisors across all of our finance organizations. And I provided you a number of those rotation descriptions that included, they're applying application of GAAP accounting, financial planning and analysis, cost analysis, One rotation is very specific about federal income tax, federal and state income tax, because we have a rotation there. Preparing financial statements, closing the books, internal control evaluation. So we have a variety of different rotations. That's not to say every one of those folks in those rotations is going to be seeking their CPA, because they're not all accounting majors and don't have the educational background. So we are in the midst of transitioning and trying to promote this for those accounting majors to allow them to obtain their certification. And the question I had was, we have several managers and supervisors who are CPAs. We would only have, that's baseline. Everybody will have been or is qualified as a CPA. The question is whether or not they're registered. Some of them are, many of them are, however, several are not. And in order for us to complete the SBA 12 Section 9 verification section, we, which is very specifically states that the supervising CPA holding a valid CPA certificate for no less than 3 years prior to the verification of such experience. I'm assuming that means registration, but I'm looking for you all as the experts to help me understand. Is it simply having been a CPA, worked in public accounting? I myself was a partner at Arthur Andersen. I was licensed, no longer licensed because I'm in private industry. And so I am registered now because I am on a board of a public company as the audit committee chair. And I have re-registered myself. Frank helped me through that process a number of years ago. We have folks who are managing these folks day to day through those rotations that I believe several of which fulfill the expectations of the industry experience under Section 7. And I am just asking for clarification relative to that holding a valid CPA certificate. And then if it is a certificate that is registered, it does go on to say for no less than 3 years. Would we, for those, it could be 3 to 5 maybe individuals, could we get some relief until they have that registration on hand for 3 years? Because we're in a transition here. We travelers are committed to registering all of our managers and supervisors, and the company will be paying for that. So we'll be registering all of those CPAs to bring their credentials back up. And so, but we want to enable our young professionals to earn their CPA through this experience. And it hasn't changed the qualifications of the supervisor at all, whether they're registered or not registered. So I'm trying to get a little bit of an understanding so that we're trying to fulfill all of your expectations and do it in a way in which we're being open and transparent. And if we need to clarify something, then we'll adjust accordingly. And but I was just trying to understand that. And that's kind of the key question I have at this point in time, whether there is a necessity for the 3-year registration prior to them verifying experience. And if yes, is it possible to get some level of relief? Again, I don't know the number of instances this will be, but it will be no more than 2 to 3, maybe 5 instances over the next couple of years until we get everybody fully re-registered for the 3-year windows.
So if I could talk about the registered versus licensed, I think that anyone that passes the exam and meets the requirements has a certificate. And then the second thing they have is a license or a registration. So it seems to me that when you just read that either licensed or registered would qualify. Is that what you would think, Frank?
I do read it that way because, and then we're talking about the regulation is 20-280-24 subsection C, because this is for the verification of the experience, and there are 5 different scenarios, plus another one we can get to later, which is down in G. But anyway, that for verifying, and A is a supervising CPA holding a valid CPA certificate, and it says for no less than 3 years prior to the verification of such experience. Then B and C refer to, well, B is a public accountant holding, so that'd be an old one, public accountant license, but even C as a human resources personnel at the direction of a supervising CPA holding a valid CPA license for no less than 3 years prior to verifying such experience. And then even E goes into the auditor of public accounts for an applicant whose experience was obtained while employed with the Office of the Auditors of Public Accounts for the state of Connecticut. If no one had held a CPA license or public accountant license for 3 years, was in a supervisory capacity over said applicant, which is interesting. They carve out that for that. But anyway, so A does say,
Well, that's left over from the Becker and Donahue days when nobody was a CPA.
Anyway, right. So, but anyway, so the B, C, D, and E all refer to a license. A refers specifically to a certificate. So that's, words mean something, and I do think that, a certificate, it says valid, so it would at least have to be registered, I would think. Although, I mean, I'm not, I guess that change goes back, I did the history to, I don't know when, back in the aughts maybe, because it just does seem strange that it's
Probably
not
the
licensed.
90s.
Okay, wow,
Yeah.
even before, okay. Anyway, but that's how I read it. I'm open to anyone disagreeing, but
Well, yeah, I guess it also depends on how you define supervision. Direct, indirect, running the program, or oversight, or what. I can't imagine it's necessarily that the person sitting next to them at a table is the licensed or registered CPA at any time. And some of that just applied to, some of it applied to who could attest to it, to the experience. Somebody from human resources who reported, et cetera, could also do it. So yeah, it kind of made my head hurt.
And I'm an outsider trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and it did seem that there was also in that same series, there was something about that addressed alternative experience, and what could be accepted. Is that our magic doorway here?
Well, let's see. So subsection G of that section is non-conforming experience petitioning the board. So it reads, an applicant who wishes to submit experience to support his or her application for an initial certified public accountant certificate, which does not match the scope and breadth set above, including but not limited to experience gained as an instructor at a college or university, shall bear the burden of proof to demonstrate that experience submitted is of sufficient quality and diversity to fulfill requirements in subsection E, which are the of this section. Subsection E lays out the different qualifying experience.
So the question then is, does that allow us to make this determination to provide relief, even if on a case-by-case basis, or in this case, a program-related basis?
Right, that is the question. Is that kind of if all else fails, can they just come to the board with their experience and say, hey, This is what I got.
Yeah. And I think a lightning, if I make a legal opinion, a lightning bolt should strike me. It seems like that allows us to do it. Yeah, I think historically, the reason, the protection of the public reason for this is it was related to independent audits. Well, we all know that a certain percentage, probably as many as 1/3 of CPAs, go through their professional careers as highly competent tax professionals and don't do audits.
Right.
And if I ever gave tax advice, another lightning bolt would come down. But so it
I would think we would owe a policy to Brian and his group, just so that if we're not here, someone else would interpret it the same way.
Yeah,
right. So
May
I'd
I
be
ask
happy
a
to
question?
work with Frank to
you
draft.
make that.
something.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
So Mr. Riley, my question is really logistics. Like, so what does it mean when it's a program? Like, so if someone applies, submits an application, what would they put in the experience section? Did you say travelers program and would be signed by someone designated by the program, or would it be signed by different supervisor, by different people?
It would, the latter, it would be signed by those individuals that are that have worked with that individual, that candidate, throughout that year rotation in the program. We've also considered expanding this beyond the program because we have plenty of other CPAs that we've hired or accounting folks that we've hired into the company that didn't go through this financial leadership program, but are closing the books on a regular basis, or working in our tax department, or doing budgeting and analysis, and doing, you know, hardcore accounting. So yes, it would be supervisors only would be signing off on each window of work that they performed.
So how would our licensing unit know who's in the program, who's not? It seems like it's not a set, it's too moving of a program. Like it could be this person, could be that person. So my concern would be, it's not too set, like it's not too clear who's really in the program, who's really supervisor. You know what I mean? It would seem more like case by case basis, they would come to the board.
It's the same as anybody without a program coming to you. I would assume under reading this, I'm just proposing it through our program because it's something that we've shifted to, and I'm just trying to get clarification. But it sounds to me as though, and my understanding as a CPA when this first came out was that anybody working in any private industry working for a CPA could take 6 months working for this manager and 6 months this manager and a year here and 2 years, you know, piecing it all together. That's how I understood it. I think I'm talking to you about the program because we have designated managers, we have designated supervisors today that we're evaluating, and we're trying to get their verification credentials approved. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I guess then it was I might have misunderstood your request. I thought the request was very specific about a program, that basically anyone in the program would automatically be approved. But we're talking more about anyone.
Not all of
That
our
would be like-
rotations, not all of our rotations in the program would meet the Section 7 industry experience. So it's only those rotations. And we have probably 30 different rotations, and there's probably 8 to 10 of them that we believe are firmly fulfilling Section 7 industry experience. And those managers are very specific managers with very specific supervisors. And those verifiers would be signing off on that 1 year rotation of work. There's rare instances where we have a December grad who we hired. It could be an 18-month, or it could be a 6-month, just to get them onto their normal cycle, because we normally hire for, you know, after graduation. They graduate in May, we bring them in June, July, and they work for a year on a rotation basis there. So that's
Right, and and on the application, they don't just say, you know, work for XYZ firm. What it says is what they actually did
Exactly.
specifically to gain that experience, did
Exactly.
audited, whatever, did this work and all. So that would have to be part of this too,
Correct.
these applications too. What specifically in the program qualify? Because I'm guessing
Yeah.
even in all the rotations, maybe not everything they necessarily did was, not every part of a rotation may be going towards the experience, but they would have to still list specifically what does in there.
Correct. Correct.
If not, then we have to change the way we look at our experience.
Yeah, the form itself has a description of the work that you've done in there. I've signed off on these in the past, and it is a full description. I make sure it's, when I look at it, I make sure, because it's my name signing it and verifying it, that it clearly fulfills those expectations of Section 7 here. So, and
Well, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so when somebody comes, are they going to be able to say, because that everybody will have had a base equivalent experience through this? They might have something different because they might bring more to the table, et cetera, but is everybody that goes through your program going to have basically the same base of having checked, X number of experience boxes?
Yes, they will. There's an education component to our program where they do an introduction to insurance accounting. They do an introduction to insurance first, and then insurance accounting, stat and gap and tax. And then we have actuarial analysis where they look at the reserving method, which is a huge part of our financial results. And then there's an enterprise risk and controls, risk management and controls course that I teach actually to all of our participants. And so they all have that baseline, but it's not every rotation is going to qualify for CPA experience. We're very clear on that there's a very, I'd say 8 to 10 out of the 30 rotations are going to meet Section 7. And those are the only ones that we're looking to submit as industry experience.
Okay. So I ask, oh, go ahead, please, Kat.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm still a little confused. Are you asking for an exception for all the supervisors to not have the 3 years as it is right now? Or are you asking for a certain individuals to be named?
That's a very fair question, and that's exactly where we're at, because I don't know where each of the 8 to 10 managers and supervisors over these rotations, where they stand on their registration. As I said, some are registered and have been registered historically, so shouldn't be a problem. That's kind of off the table. There are those that are not registered, and that we will be getting them registered in the first quarter of 2022. Once we get this, we finalize things, we will get them registered. And my ask is that for those that are getting registered in the first quarter of 2022, that they've been supervising this person for the last 9 months, but they just got their paperwork completed. Does that, having that paperwork completed, does that change their supervision of this person over the last 9 months? And so I'm asking that if we could get some relief until we get all of our supervisors and managers up to 3 years of registered, being back registered and ongoing into the future, can we get some relief there? And again, I don't know if it's 2 or 3 instances there, but I can't imagine it's anything more than 4 or 5, maybe.
Frank, can you read that section again about the 3 years? Because is it registered or licensed for 3 years, or is it holding a certificate for 3 years? Because then the registration.
Go ahead, Frank.
The language is, and this is in, the language is as a supervising CPA holding a valid CPA certificate for no less than 3 years prior to the verification of such experience.
So we wouldn't care if they just got registered this month. If
Uh,
they had the certificate, then it doesn't matter.
Well, I guess it depends on how we are saying valid, what we mean by valid. I mean, because what we do, if someone is not registered, they have their CPA, their certificate is considered qualified. They are considered qualified, but unregistered.
But they're still holding a certificate.
That is correct.
In the past, when we looked at it case by case basis, what we really looked at is to make sure that the verifier had up to date, experience, enough experience. So let's say if you're brand new, you might not have the experience to really know accountancy to really verify. And so, you might want to keep, the board might want to keep that in mind. It's like if you give a blanket waiver for just anybody without looking at the circumstances, then you really don't know who is getting this waiver.
But what I'm saying is that it doesn't sound like the statute says that they have to be licensed or registered as long as they have a certificate that for 3 years. And so
Well, it does say valid certificate. What does that mean? If you, we have cases where people register, like they qualified, they got a certificate, but they never did anything with it for 30 years. They never, paid to get the certificate renewed, and they never got a license. So they just qualified. To get qualified, all they have to show is experience and, the qualifications, and it just sits there. They don't renew it, they don't do anything. It could be for 30 years. So do you really want someone like that to verify experience? Now, a concern in the past has been brought up also that by requiring certificate instead of licenses, that person may not be up to date at all, because as you know, if you have a certificate, you don't have to get CPEs. So even if you renew your certificates for every year, the only thing you're really showing is you care enough to renew your certificate, but you're not really getting up to date on your education or like new laws.
but we don't say that in the statute. That so if they held a certificate for 3 years and they just registered this month, they're holding a valid, would we allow that?
Yes, that is the issue, and I believe we have not allowed in the past.
Is there anybody in the program that has had a certificate for 3 years?
Yes, there are, like I said.
Well, can't they act as the validators of the
Well, that gets into
the experience?
Then that gets into that would get into the definition of the certifying or the supervising CPA,
Well, yeah,
whether it's direct or indirect.
because a new accountant in a CPA firm can very often work for several years without actually directly working for a CPA. They're working for an organization that's under the supervision and oversight.
And we have allowed in the past indirect supervisors to verify experience, as long as it can be shown that they were looking at the work, even if they weren't the direct supervisor. If they were, as long as they were aware of what the person was doing and was looking at the work. We have a lot that has been allowed in the past.
Yeah, ultimately, somebody's going to sign a return or a tax return or an audit that
Right.
is in that chain.
Correct. That's what we're trying to clarify.
Well, I'm trying to summarize in my head where we are, and I'm having difficulty.
We should ask Frank and Brian to work together to come up with a policy that we could approve or reject or amend.
Let me just,
I think Go ahead.
Let me just add to that, I mean, it seems that the Travelers has done a marvelous job, but if we're going to go to the trouble to make some potential amendments or policy clarifications, I think we need to think a little bit broader than just what the Travelers has been doing, as admirable as their program is. So we won't be back here in the near future with other issues. So it's sort of a tall order. I mean, I think the Travelers program seems very acceptable and something we should help facilitate, but we need to think a little bit more broadly if we're going to be changing any work.
And there is some historical precedent for this. It's probably before the last set of statutes. But in the 80s and probably in the 90s, we had several large companies. And I don't know whether it might have even been the Travelers at the time. It might have been the Hartford. One of the big insurance companies had a program that they could certify the experience. Now, I don't know what happened to them. There were at least 3. And maybe they were before these statutes. So, but I think Marcia, I think, and Carl, I think your recommendation's good. We've got to take a look and come up with a policy, and so that we have something that fits anybody that comes up with a superior program. Don't have to keep reinventing the wheel or do it on an individual case basis, which I believe we have the authority to do.
I'd be more than happy to work with Frank, and I think I don't know if it's writing a new policy as opposed to interpretive guidance to help organizations, I don't want to say thread the needle, but fulfill the expectations of the State Board of Accountancy here, because I think all of your concerns are legitimate and questions are very fair. I want to be as transparent and fair with you all. I respect the profession, and I don't want us to dilute it and at all. And your content of protect the public is very important. That I totally agree with you. So I'm more than happy to help work with Frank and try to pull together some interpretive guidance. Hopefully, I think that's how I would see it, because I think the words stand on their own. It's just Frank probably has the knowledge of the technical terminology, and let's make sure it's something that's can sustain, organization to organization over time.
Be great.
So I just, are people, they're comfortable with me working with someone outside? We're trying to get to fit our regs on this. I mean, again, I mentioned this two meetings back, but full disclosure, my wife is now retired from the Travelers. She was not in this program or auditing, and actually, as I understand it, internal audit used to drive her nuts. She was in the special liability group, and they finished their last audit, and she said, "That's it for me. It's the last one I'm doing," and internal audit. So, again, but I just want to make sure that people comfortable with someone on the outside working with us to set a policy, as opposed to just us trying to come up with something based on the knowledge that we do have.
Well, I think probably we should have one of our members in your little group too, and then it can be presented to the full board.
I just asked a question, Kat. You said that in previous cases similar to this, that we required the person to have a registered or be registered or licensed for 3 years prior to signing off. Is that what you said?
Based on my limited knowledge, I believe that's our interpretation. Yes.
Okay.
I mean, Denise, our licensing staff is not here to confirm that, but that's how we've interpreted it, like valid whenever that language comes up. We would want to make sure that person has been paying. That's what valid means, that they're up to date, they're registered, because otherwise what would valid really mean? They just wouldn't have one, you know, because if you think about it, they apply, they didn't get it, so they wouldn't have a certificate. So that's just how we've interpreted it. It doesn't mean it's the only way to interpret it, but that's how I believe we've done it.
I concur with that.
All right. It just seems to me all Brian's really asking for is that if a person had a qualified certificate and they had it for 3 years and they registered it, you know, today, can they sign off on, I mean, boiling it down, that's really what you're asking for, right, Brian?
Exactly, exactly.
And, you know, that's
Thank you,
not to say
Peter. That was
we wouldn't
helpful.
approve it, but yeah, just to, you know, remind everyone that any policies made would eventually have to be, make itself into the regulations anyway.
That's right.
So, you know, I don't think Frank's concerned about working with outsiders really, you know, yeah, sure, initially you can work with anybody, but eventually the board would have to approve and then you'd have to go through the regs process anyway. So I don't think there are any concerns.
Can I just say that I like John's idea of taking one member of the board to work with Frank and the travelers. But I keep going back to my own legislative experience when I worked for the state legislature. And I mean, it's very common to have, well, in this case, in the legislature would be lobbyists, but interested parties with special knowledge provide advice and input about best practices. So I mean, I think that's fine to do that.
Wanted to bring it up and make sure it was discussed.
Right.
It's something that I have done frequently with many agencies, both in my current life as well as when I worked for CBIA. We're commonly asked by agencies to provide a draft of what we're looking for, and then it's discussed
Right.
and we go from there.
Mhm.
Okay, so would anybody like to volunteer to be available for Frank and to work with Frank and Brian? If there's nobody, I will, but I will also mention at this point that Kat has informed me that there are some hearings that are moving through the process that will require participation of board members. So that if you dodge this bullet, you're probably going to catch another bullet. So I don't know how many are audit, how many are tax, or what the general tenor of them are, or even how many, but there are several coming through.
Frank, I can work with, I mean, John, I can work with Frank and Brian on this if you'd like. That's fine.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay. Well, it's not fully resolved, but I think there's progress. So if there's any other comments, and if not, we'll move on. I think perhaps we might address, I don't know whether do we have to vote to put on the agenda Bonnie's issue? On conforming our statutes
I think we
to the.
well, it depends on what you want to
Probably
do
won't
with it,
hurt.
right? I guess you should just to, but
But it seems to be relevant to this.
right. No, definitely is. I just is.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we add Bonnie's issue to the agenda.
Second,
I'll second.
okay. In
I'm
favor?
sorry, what do you mean by adding?
Bonnie's issue is one of those, the statutes
No.
that we were reviewing yesterday, the 4 3 years.
Right, I
Issue?
understood that. What I was asking is it to be voted on next time, or would you like some language and the regulations to be presented so you can vote on it next time?
I think we probably have to
I think
discuss it
actually,
We
this
have
one
Well, I think we
actually
just
has
know,
to-
just, I'm sorry, but my thought would be even before you even work on language, does the board even want to entertain changing anything? So that, yeah, I think that's.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
what I want. I think we'd vote on whether we want to entertain changing it. I think it would require change in statute as opposed to regulation.
It's in the
No, unfortunately,
regulation.
it's regulation. The statute just says experience as required by the board
Oh, crap.
in
Sorry.
regulation. Now, I guess technically we could change that, put it in the statute, and which would then override whatever's in the regulations, but it would split the requirements.
Okay, I guess the question is twofold. One, first, do people feel like they're comfortable making a decision on whether we should consider basically conforming to the rest of the nation? We're one of a very few that are out of step, which is not unusual. And or not. And I'm really, it depends on what we think that the purpose of that was for the 3 years.
It's now currently 2, just to be clear. It was 3. It was
Okay,
changed.
2. Yeah, the 2
It
years.
was just 3 years if the applicant first took the examination prior to January 1st, 2000. And it's 2 years in all other cases. But it's still more than the 1 year that apparently most of the country requires.
Most of the country.
I mean, presumably, I guess maybe years ago, it was always 2 for all the other states, and over time, it's been reinterpreted as 1 as being sufficient. That's my guess. I mean, I recall back to the days when I was getting certified, and 2 was always in my head, whether it was, Connecticut or New York or some other state.
To shorten the time, what we could do is draft, taking the language from the model of the Accountancy Act for the regulation language, and then you can vote on that. So that, if you vote yes, we don't have to wait for another meeting to approve the language, because I think taking the language from the Model Act, it shouldn't take that much time at all.
I have the Model Act language, which is very clear. And it addresses both the verification process and the experience in the same one paragraph.
I have to say, I wouldn't be in favor of dropping it. That it seems like we're not dropping it because we want to protect the public. We're dropping it because we want to increase the pipeline. And even if it does increase the pipeline, CPA firms have enough of trouble getting people to stay. And now that they only would need to stay for 1 year, for all those reasons, I wouldn't be in favor of dropping it from 2 years.
I don't
Well,
believe
showing my age again, I remember the 3-year experience requirement when I started was considered the 3-year Slave Labor Act, because nobody had to pay a whole lot to keep you for 3 years. I'm not sure we should be in support of that either.
I just say that this is not the Uniform Accountancy Act. This is not a recent change. So it's just become more a hotter topic because of the pipeline, but it was not changed from 2 years to 1 year to try to encourage more CPAs. And the other thing is, because so many other states have it, it's so easy for our people to become licensed in other states. So it doesn't, like, they'll just go to Massachusetts the same way we had it when we didn't allow people to sit after 120 credits. So I don't think that it changes how many people are going to go about becoming CPAs, but it changes the fact that Connecticut becomes less of a deterrent because we've got stricter rules.
Got it.
I agree with Marcia. I don't think the pipeline consideration is really relevant from the board's perspective. I mean, really, the question is 1 versus 2 years of experience. Do we think one, or that additional year that's currently required, is very important for the individual to demonstrate relevant experience and knowledge to be able to exercise their duties as a CPA, or at some point in time, you know, the Uniform Accountancy Act and some of the other states decided that 1 was sufficient. And so really it sounds like 1 versus 2 in that context versus the CPA pipeline consideration is really what the board should be thinking about in terms of our role.
I think if you look a little bit more macro at what other professions do, for example, internships, which I know this is an internship, but I think it is analogous. In medicine, it's 1 year. My daughter recently became a registered dietitian. That's 1 year. In the medical world, which I think is pretty analogous, it's a 1 year thing. And that seems to be more in keeping with the trend in various professions. And I mean, I think we have to be aware that Connecticut's a small state, and there's lots of other states all around us, apparently, that only have the 1 year requirement now. And it seems like that's the trend. And setting aside, I'm not really making the pipeline argument as much as I am trying to level the playing field with contiguous states that are in some sense competing for talent.
Okay. I'm not quite sure where we are. It does sound like there are differing opinions here, so maybe we can put together a, I mean, I'll just, my only opinion is generally I'm in favor of sticking with the uniform accountancy and the national standards, unless there's something that's really egregious that we disagree with, that is a serious issue. But perhaps we could put together the wording and just vote on it next time. I mean, we've already missed the legislative session, so
Yeah.
it's not going to affect the timing of anything.
Well, again, this is a regulatory change, so sooner the better,
Right.
as we've seen.
Do we know how long we've been out of step, if you will, like with the act? Is this like, we're talking decades or?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I
Yeah.
can find out.
Okay, just be
Yeah.
interesting to know.
Although we do seem to be perennially out of step with their one thing or another.
Mhm.
I'm not quite sure why.
Aren't we finally back in step with marketing? Do we want to talk about the supervision map too?
Say
So
say again.
she asked if we wanted to talk about the supervision aspect of it too, because there's two pieces here. There's the years of experience going from 2 to 1. And there's also who can sign off on, who can verify the experience. So the Uniform Accountancy Act says that any licensee, so any certified public accountant could certify the experience. I think the one thing that would be different in Connecticut is that we're unusual in that we allow registered CPAs in addition to licensed. And the reason for that is people in industry, for the most part, they're not attesting to anything, so they don't have to be a licensed CPA. Where the cost is so high for the license here, people in industry for the most part opt for registration. In other states,
Well, we're also one of the few states that has a two-tier system.
yes,
Almost nobody recognizes that sort of idiocy.
right. And then, and the reason for it isn't that they're any less competent, it's that there's hundreds of dollars of differences. You know, I think it's a
Oh, yeah.
565 versus 40. And most other states, like I think Massachusetts is less than $100 for a 2 or 3 year license, where we're close to 600 for a 1 year. So if
Correct.
we were to move forward with the uniform language, I would make the recommendation that our language, the language be modified to address the fact that we do have a two-tiered system. But again, here they allow any licensee. It doesn't have to be someone you're directly reporting to.
Yep. Sorry about that.
And the reason for
yeah.
this is because of the industry issue. We do have a
No.
lot of CPAs in industry.
That
Yeah.
was, I reminded Frank and Kat yesterday that our licensing fee was 6 times the national average
Wow.
and 3 times the next most egregious. And it's not just our profession. So that is why we ended up with that silly two-tier system with all the whatever. Yeah, I whatever we can clean up.
So then we could be asked by our neighbor, your CPA, can you sign off on this and licensee?
No, there's specific, give me 2 seconds. I've got the language here. And this is if we use the Uniform Accountancy Act. You always have the ability, you like to stick to it when you can, but you always have the ability to modify it somewhat if you like. Let's see here. It says that an applicant for initial issuance of a certificate under this section shall show that the applicant has had 1 year of experience. This experience shall include providing any type of service or advice involving the use of accounting, attest, compilation, management advisory, financial advisory, tax or consulting skills, all of which was verified by a licensee, meeting requirements prescribed by the board by rule. The experience would be acceptable if it was gained through employment in government, industry, academia, or public practice. So they're trying to catch here the exact people that you're talking about, the ones that are, so it includes public practice, obviously. We do have a lot of CPAs or people that would like to get their credential that did not go directly into public. And that's happening more and more often. I believe it is right now, 1 out of every 3 accounting students goes into public and the other 2 don't. But the credential is worthwhile to everyone. It's been shown that if you have your CPA credential, that you can earn $1 million more over the life of your career than somebody without that credential. So it is something that's very much desired. And there's also a standard to it where you can go to people and say, I don't have all that experience, but I've got my CPA credential, and therefore, you know, I'm showing that I'm worthwhile because I passed that, as many label it, horrific test. So I do think there's a lot there. We do have a gentleman that we work closely with that's going to be coming onto our board this year, Mohammed Malloy, and he has said that when he first was looking for a job out of college, I guess he was a finance major, and he kept on hearing, you don't have experience in this area, you don't have experience in this area. And he went and gained experience through internships while he was working on his master's, got his CPA. And he said, my internships combined, you know, which gave him the experience he needed because he'd already graduated from undergraduate school, combined with my CPA now show you that I don't need that 10 years of experience. I've got, you know, these 2 years of experience and my CPA credential, and that should show you that I know what I'm doing. And he got his first job in accounting that way. So I think that there's a lot to be said to the credential, as I'm sure all of you sat through the test. I didn't. I'm lucky I sat through the bar exam, which was only 2 days back to back, which is, in my opinion, much better than sitting through 4 separate tests the way you do. But it is something that a lot of people are now going directly into industry, though switching back and going into public later sometimes. So it's not the usual where we only had it going one way at one time, where people would go to public first and then leave possibly to go to industry. We have it going both ways now. And therefore allowing those individuals to get the supervision they need, even if they're not under a directly report to a CPA, I think makes a difference. And I think the example you have with Mr. Katz, if I remember, he's the gentleman that was the CFO that clearly has the experience in the areas that we would like him to have the experience, but he's not reporting to a CPA. But he has CPAs that were willing to verify that he worked in this area. And there were the accountants, I believe, that his company worked with, the accounting firm that checked out his paperwork, that did their returns, et cetera. So I do think there's ways to get the experience when you're in industry, academia, et cetera. And this UAA section allows for that.
Actually, he's next on the agenda. Yes.
I have a question. Based on because Bonnie, you mentioned, the language is something is effective, verified by licensee, meeting the rules as described by the board. Do we know what other states' rules are? What the I think that would be helpful to know, what it is that the other states have used to make sure that whoever is verifying this is doing so with good knowledge of what the person did, et cetera. So I think that's important for, than just the general language like that.
Yeah. Particularly since it appears that our statutes, in my opinion, from our discussion yesterday, already have an escape hatch that lets you on a case-by-case basis as a board determine whether the experience is appropriate and the attesters, et cetera, as attested to.
I'm happy to get some language from other states, such as Massachusetts, which is nearby, but states that we would consider ourselves competing with. And I do understand what you're saying, John, regarding there is a backdoor. But one of the things that's so complicating for people is that it is a backdoor. It's hard to know. It'd be nice if they were clearer and we had something that was straightforward.
Yeah, you can't rely, which is, I think, is Mr. Riley's point. You can't rely on 2 years down the road the back door being available.
That's right.
So I agree.
So I'll work with the AICPA to get the whatever the board has prescribed in states that are near us and or competitors with similar makeup states. I think that's helpful, unless you'd like me to go about it a different way. But when working with the legislature in past, I try to get those states that people thought were relevant where Connecticut was concerned.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of to throw this out here because Frank has a very valid point in that when you're dealing with regulations in the state of Connecticut in a long time frame, the sooner the better is always better. On the other hand, I always feel a little uncomfortable in bringing something that's reasonably important and comp it up and then just sort of turning it over in one meeting of 1 to 2 hours and making an additional without people being able to let it stew and whatever. But so I'm just throwing it out to the board and as to what your preference is here on this change. Do we? I have no problem if the board's comfortable with going ahead and saying we're going to confirm the language, or say we're going to start looking at various experiences, et cetera, and maybe wrap up everything in one maybe bigger action. Whoop. Marcia's picture went. She must be going for a cup of coffee.
No, someone was coming in my office here.
Oh. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm really in favor of the more holistic approach. I don't want to have to keep opening up this can, well, I shouldn't call it a can of worms, I guess, but a myriad issues. I think it's better to take a little bit of time and be a little bit more thoughtful and do some scenario thinking so that we can pretty much hopefully take care of all the issues for the near term future.
I like
I'm in
that.
total agreement with Carla's point. Let's look at everything, because if we rush the judgment, then a month later, a new scenario will come up and we'll be
Right.
back in the same situation.
Yep.
And just along those lines, if it's acceptable to you, while we're doing this, because this in large part is being done to try to accommodate people in government and in industry. When I say accommodate them, recognize them more than anything else. Similar to the travelers, I know that Electric Boat and Pratt & Whitney have programs that are leadership programs where they rotate individuals, et cetera. So as we look at other states and what their language is that's been prescribed by the board, we have these companies that are in multiple states that we can work with as well. And I'm happy to get their feedback and bring it back as well. I don't have a need to rush it either. Regs take forever. And I agree that the sooner we start it, the better. But I also know that modifying regs is as difficult as getting the new set of regs through. It takes as long, so I'd rather do it right the first time.
Yep.
Okay, so do we have any volunteers to work on this little project? Other than me, I'll do it, but. Okay, all the non-volunteers recognize that they're putting themselves up on the list for the hearings.
I'm just concerned about both of these. I don't think I'd be a good advocate for them.
Oh, okay, understood.
Just
The
keeping myself open for any of the
devil's
tax
advocate
cases.
can be worth, I'm sorry, Dan, what was that?
I said I'm keeping myself open for the tax cases.
Gotcha. And I will say, I mean, even the Pope has a devil's advocate when they're considering sainthood. Okay, moving on and getting close here before the extensions. Mr. Katz. I think this is interesting, and I would lean towards giving him an opportunity to appeal to the what we've referred to as the back door. He's not only, it's not that he's very persistent, he's also very thorough. He's put a lot of work in here. He seems to care intensely about the responsibilities as well as the he doesn't come across as a guy who's just looking for a resume builder, a stamp. He's been very serious about this, and he seems to have put together something with a lot of people that would attest. And this might be something that we could give him the opportunity to, or we could make him wait another meeting and see what we come up with our broad outlook, and see whether he can be accommodated under that. But I have to admit, I have a sneaking bit of admiration for him. I think that he's got the kind of drive that you kind of like to see in the profession. I'm not getting any comments here. Alternative one is we go to that particular section of the statute that allows us allows us to entertain an exception and on the experience and put something up more significant than he would have had in the letter, or we say that we really need to wrap this up with our policy and consider it at the next meeting.
I would love to see us wrap it in with the policy and consider it at the next meeting. I liked that idea.
Any other? I don't believe
Yeah.
we need to put that to an, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, no, I think what Marcia suggested makes sense to kind of wrap it together, somewhat
Okay.
relevant.
I see
connected in
Carla moving her
many
head
ways.
up and down, so.
I would
and Pete
agree too.
Moving his head up and down, so. If Tim's violently opposed, I guess he is in a minority. He doesn't seem, okay, we'll defer that. Then I guess we move on to our new business. First
question.
is the agreement with the PCAOB. Yes, Frank.
Oh, sorry, the travelers program, not the travelers, the NASBA experience review program was
Oh.
also on the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is that something the board, I know this is taking a long time, but I see, don't know
No,
if
I
the
think
board
that
wanted to
should be-
allow that as an option for candidates or not. That was there.
Not a mandated option, but an option that's available if somebody wanted them to attest to their experience. They do have a CPA that can be brought in, but that is everybody who listened last time, that CPA would mostly be making up for not CPAs, but chartered accountants, et cetera, on the other side. The statutes do allow us to consider it. It doesn't mandate that we accept the resolution of the NASBA. And it does cost them $500 to $700 to do it. So it would not be something that I would mandate on anybody that needed to. Do we need to? Well, I guess it's a policy thing.
I think a policy just,
Yeah.
so people know that they're going to spend that money, that at least would be considered.
Anybody?
This
And
is
as
Pete. I
approach-
kind of feel like if we get some of these policy things decided, if we're going to go along with the UAA and so forth, that it would resolve. I mean, most of the experience problems, and quite honestly, most of the experience questions that make it to the board are the kind that deal with industry experience and who's signing off on it. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
I don't know, I kind of feel like I don't see where the NASMA experience review program is particularly beneficial to our potential candidates or whatever.
Unless you've got somebody that just moved from a foreign country,
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of limited.
and that we can consider when it kind of limited.
Yes. So I don't know.
Okay.
My opinion is that it's not really beneficial.
Yeah, certainly wouldn't be a requirement.
Okay.
Okay. PCOB letter agreement. It's a standard agreement that basically says that if they're going to continue to provide us with PCOB reports, that essentially we abide by the law regarding the confidentialities of certain findings in there. That they're, findings that are cleared within 1 year are just always confidential, et cetera, and will meet the confidentiality requirements. We've got an old one left. We need to have a new one to designate a new contact over here because it would no longer be Sonia, sorry. And we've replaced Sonia with Kat.
Yeah.
And I think everybody's had an opportunity to look at it. And I think we do have to get the board's approval and a motion to pass for me to sign it on behalf of the board.
So moved.
We do want access to, yeah, we do want access
Right,
to
and
those.
we have been getting them, but this is just updated.
Yeah,
Right.
I'll second that.
it's the new format with the new contacts. Second? Okay,
Marcia
Marcia.
second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, on to the extensions. We've got a lot of them.
Before we get into these, should we have a general discussion about, like there was one that talked about on December 30th, that their thing canceled, their exam canceled on them the day before they were supposed to take it. Should we, maybe get a general sense of where we stand out there as far as COVID and cancellations and to see if we should think about a mass extension again?
Good question. Anyone?
Do we have any knowledge of of what's happening?
Yeah, that was what I wanted to say, just what Marcia just said, which is we must have a record of when those cancellations occurred. I mean, maybe any like policy or way of looking at it that we espouse can be tied into the dates of the cancellations of the exams. So, I mean, I'm just making this up. So like there's a 60-day extension for cancellations on certain dates.
I just wanted to make one note that of all the requests we received, I believe that's the only one that talks about cancellation.
Really?
That said, things are moving so quickly now. Things are changing so rapidly right now. We don't know. But in terms of standard approvals, the commissioner has given standard 90 days extension for NTS. Those are the notice to schedule. Those have not been coming to the board because those needed to be done quickly, to NASFA. So for those, the commissioner has approved a standard 90 days. So I don't know if that's helpful to you.
But there was only one that talked about it that I can remember talking about a cancellation, but then several talked about COVID and the family and all had COVID and people that are afraid to go out with COVID. And it seems like the cases are higher now than they've ever been. So I didn't know if, and maybe Bonnie has some information on what's happening in the exams that we should at least be aware of.
I don't have any, I can tell you we've received a lot of calls because people have concerns with exactly what you said. Even though supposedly the latest version is not as deadly, people are still very concerned about it, primarily because of family members worried about bringing it home to their mother, their grandmother, a sick relative, etc. So we saw people first starting to come back to events, and that has totally retreated so that we are back 100% virtual again. And we're not even thinking of anything till the spring. We are hearing similar things from people about possibly delaying when they're going to sit for the exam, etc., or don't want to lose the beginning part of it, but what are they going to do? Are they going to put themselves at risk? And I think that the 5-day rule, just based on the short time it's been out there, shrinking it from 10 days of quarantine to 5, have a lot of people concerned as well. And I don't know if that's combined with everyone seeming to have a cold this year that didn't have one for the last 2 years. But, you know, people hear someone sniffle and they turn around and it's, you know, like you've got leprosy or something. It's, it is something where everyone's concerned. So unfortunately, I don't have any specific facts, but I will tell you we're receiving a lot of calls asking us whether the remote testing is possible yet, whether this is, there's any thought to granting extensions to allow people to wait till after this latest surge has passed. But I don't know that they'll ever stop being surges either. So we've just been saying no, but we'd report back to people when we had more information to share. I think one of the things that has made people a bit nervous regarding testing too is, remember initially they were keeping people socially distanced. They stopped doing that in Connecticut. So if you go into the testing sites in Connecticut, people are not distanced. I know one of my members who did seek an extension she said the entire time she was in the testing site, she was for sure she was going to leave with COVID because she could hear people sniffling and coughing and they were right in, you know, in the cubicle next to her type of thing. So the lack of social distancing in the testing centers has not been to our advantage in terms of making people feel comfortable about going and sitting for tests either.
I also wanted to note that for some reason, NASPA has always advocated not doing a blanket extension. They said the longer away from last test, the more likely people are going to fail. But they've always asked the states to take it on a case-by-case basis. I don't know if their position has changed given the latest surge.
Well, yeah. I mean, we've only got one. Who knows? Next meeting, we may have a bunch, and maybe that would be a whole lot. Maybe that would be the time to talk about a global. You're right. It's, you know, I don't know how long this is going to last. You know, it spiked and dived. It did dive really quickly after the spike in South Africa. It seems to be doing the same thing in the UK. We may or may not be seeing the tail end of Omicron in a couple of months, and then we'll know how much we can shoot it out. And then again, we may end up with another long haul here.
Yeah.
And we'd all better get used to having more colds, because with our social distancing, we don't have any immunity to anything else except what we're vaccinated against. Oh. Anyway, I think this, whether we go further and think it more globally or not, I think the person who had their test canceled at the last minute probably should be an easy one.
Yeah. If you got through all the diarrhea talk to get to that.
Okay. Well, can we start working our way down then?
Sure, I'll try to go very quickly. I can tell how long we've been here when the sun, when it started, was on the right side of my face. Now it's on the right side of my face. The first, we have 2 additional extensions that came in late yesterday that we can, at the end, go by 2/3 votes if you like, or would you like to do that now?
Well, why don't we put them on the agenda now?
Okay, so we had 2 additionals for exam extensions, Sadie Samrin and Allison Kilbania.
Make a motion, we add those.
I'll second it.
Second?
Pete will
Anyone
second.
opposed? Thank you, Pete. Anyone opposed? Okay, I guess the motion carries.
So for the exam
start-
extensions, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Kat.
The first is a group of 5 Chinese nationals, and they all submitted similar requests. So I'm going to group them together for you. Basically, they submitted that in order to take the test, they have to, from China, they have to fly to either US, Korea, or Japan to take the test. However, visa service to Korea and Japan had been suspended. So the only way they could take the test is fly to the US. However, a flight to the US are very limited and very expensive. And
Yes.
in early August, the Chinese government issued a policy that they stopped issuing, passport and visas to non-emergency and non-essential circumstances. So I did try to verify this, and I did my own independent search, and I found a Wall Street Journal article that's stating that, despite rising pressure from the business community to ease restrictions, China has very, very strict policies, like zero tolerance strategy concerning COVID. So they must quarantine at least 14 days upon return. And some provinces, including Beijing, requires 21 days. And they have to pay for their own quarantine accommodations. So they didn't go into details, but I assume that they must like stay separately, hotel or something, they have to pay for it. And many employers will not let them take a long time off work. So they just can't do it. And so as you think about these, two requested an extension to the end of this year, which is December 31st, 2020. One person requested till June 30th, and two people didn't have a time. I think it was due to language barrier. I went back and forth several times with them, but they didn't answer. So I think whatever you want to give them, they would accept. So the first person is Rong Liang, and he has 3 exams, the AUD, the BEC, and the FAR, taken early 2020 and late 2019, and they all expired December 31st. He's requesting until December 31st of this year, and he submitted the policy, the Chinese government policy translated to US.
Could I make a motion for all 5 of these that we approve them to December 31st?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I guess I can't second, but I know those restrictions are real. I've got it. Yeah.
I mean, given how dynamic everything is, and we're dealing with the government of China, which is a notorious bureaucracy, I think we got to give them a year, given the situation.
Agreed. So we've got a motion and we've got a second. Do we have any further discussion? I believe the motion is to give them an extend to the end of this year.
Great, thank you. The next one is
okay.
Josh Budwig. He has a
well, hold it. We got to vote on it, Kat.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Okay, on we go.
Josh Budwig's, his FAR exam expired December 31st, and he was requesting until February 17th because he tested positive for COVID on December 8th, and he had to quarantine, so he missed his test date.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I think we'll move forward on the next, just anybody opposed. Motion carries.
Stephen Gagis, he has 2 exams, BEC and FAR, that expires February of 2020. So they have not, I'm sorry, one expired last year, one expires this year. And he's requesting till May 31st. And he provided doctor's note that I believe I forwarded to the board.
You did. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry, just real quick, going back to Budwig, what was the extension date approved to what?
February 17th, 2022.
Thank you.
Okay, he's the gentleman with the cardiac. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said, leave that out of the minutes. One of the doctor's notes. And how much is he asking for?
Until May 31st.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, second,
I'll second it.
Well,
any opposed? Carries. On to Corona Richards.
Kiana Richards, I believe I also forwarded you her reason, and she has 2 exams, AUD and reg, and she actually came to the board last November. She requested for an extension, but at that time, the board voted to extend all credits to the end, to December 31st. So she was captured in that umbrella. So her credits were extended to December 31st. She's now requesting to June 30th, 2020. I just wanted to note that the doctor's note did say that, you know, it was warranted that she postponed it until March of 2022, but she is asking until June of 2020.
I'll make a motion to accept.
To March or June, Dan? Daniel,
To June.
okay.
second,
Any further discussion? Any opposed? Passed.
Matthew Roy, he has 2 exams, the audit and the BEC. They both expired December 31st. He's requesting June 30th. And I sent you his reasons. At first, he just said working remotely, challenging environment, assisting elderly mother. When I asked for more specific information, he sent what I forwarded to you. In addition to the document I sent you on December 28th, he also wrote that I came down with COVID, with cold symptoms December 27th. And while I have taken a rapid at-home COVID test which showed negative results, I am not able to take a PCR test today, and therefore it's doubtful I will get the result by December 31st, the date of my scheduled exam. And so he called Prometric and they rescheduled him until January 14th. And so obviously this means I won't be able to take the exam prior to the end of the extension window, but I'm trying to follow the pandemic guidelines and not to make a selfish decision to my situation.
So he's just asking for an extension to his rescheduled date.
No, he's requesting until June 30th.
On this one, it seemed like he didn't have a lot of valid reasons as far as other than that COVID reason that to me, it seemed like, well, he was moving and he works 45 hours a week and it didn't seem like there was unless I missed it, other medical reasons for it. So I would propose that we do it to January 31st so he can do the rescheduled date.
Do we have a second?
I have a question that I don't think anybody here is medically competent to answer, which is if he really, these at-home tests aren't necessarily accurate. If he really did have COVID, I mean, it's possible he might not be able to recover in time for the January 14th test. And then we're going to be back if we do January the 31st, we're going to be back here again with this case. So I mean, I hear what Marcia's saying and I don't disagree. I just think maybe we ought to make it a little bit longer just in case.
I mean, he did throw out March 30th, 22. Didn't he in his email, Kat?
No, I don't
No?
see that.
Yeah, I thought I read that too. June 30 or
That's in his initial email.
Yeah.
His initial email over to you, I believe it's on page 304.
So I'll amend my motion to say March 30th, 2022.
Second,
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed? Yeah. Then suggested he get a lesson in brevity of writing. Okay. Going on to Sarah Stevenson.
I'm sorry, if you can give me a moment, something's wrong with my computer. Everything went blank. Okay. Uh-oh. I'm sorry, my computer is really acting up. So Sarah Stevenson. She is no, I'm sorry, can we go to the two that the board just added by 2/3 vote?
Sure.
Her name, first one is Sandy Samrin. She has a FAR expiring January 20th, and she's requesting until March 31st from medical and good cause. She said,
She's the one that they canceled it on her, that,
yes, and also in email late yesterday, she said she also received confirmation from her surgeon that they will go forward with her surgery on January 20th. And so she did provide documentation showing the surgery schedule.
so I would make a motion, she has till March 31st.
Second,
Second that.
any opposed? Yeah, that one's, motion carries. That one seemed pretty straightforward.
The next one is Allison Kilbania. She has the back and the audit both expired December 24th, and she's requesting until March 31st. But she did say, I'm not sure how long extension requests are granted, so I put the end of the first quarter, but my father has been getting treatment, or her father is ill, and she's been going, taking him to the hospital for treatment. And she did submit hospital documentation showing hospital visits for the next 8 weeks. Oh, I'm sorry, her father has been in the hospital since November 30th, and she's been caring for him. And she's requesting until March 31st. But again, she said she's not sure how long extensions are granted.
So what what date does she want to extend to?
March 31st, but she would welcome longer.
Oh. Okay, well, we'll entertain a motion.
Make the motion to give her till June 30th.
June 30th, was that?
Yeah.
Just broke up a little bit. Okay, the motion on the table to allow an extension until June 30th under the circumstances. Do we have a second?
A second.
Okay, any further discussion? Is anybody opposed to the resolution? Hearing none, the resolution Carries.
I do have a news flash that just came over my watch about a minute ago, that the state's positivity rate is now 24%.
Ouch.
Yeah, so I think that if we're talking about COVID, we gotta, at some level, hopefully it'll blow over soon, like the Omicron did in South Africa. It's already going down, but that's a very high percentage.
Very high.
So on to the CPE extension and waiver. So we had a glitch, if you will, at this year during renewal. As you know, the license renewal process is an online self-reporting honor system. And so typically the system is programmed such that you have to pay the CPA late penalty before you can renew your license. So the fee is based on the date that you entered, that you completed your CPEs. And so in 2020, when the board extended the CPE deadline to December 31st, we programmed the computer so that the deadline was December 31st, so no one was assessed a penalty, when they completed late CPEs. However, in 2021, the board extended the deadline only to July 31st. However, we forgot to reprogram the computer, so it still showed December 31st. So when people renewed and they submitted late CPEs, they were not assessed the late CPE fees. When we discovered this in early, I say the first week in December, we immediately fixed the system, and we ran a report, and there were about 35 people on a list who had renewed, but with late CPEs without paying. So we notified them, and most of them paid without incidents. We have a list now of about 9 people who we're going back and forth with, who are not, willing to pay. So this first, there's only one that came to you with a request. So Sarah Stevenson, she completed her CPE on October 14th. When I wrote to her, as to everyone else that said, you owe a late CPE, she responded that I was unaware that the deadline was July 31st. I thought it was extended until December 31st due to COVID. The $625 fee is an absolutely absurd amount of money to pay for a late fee, especially with such notice. I won't be able to pay this amount by December 31st. So we gave everybody until the 31st to pay. And then she said, I've made all my payments timely in the past. Please let me know if there's anything you can do to waive this fee. So I responded that the extension to the July 31st had been posted on the DCP website since March 2021, which is incorrect, by the way. It was up there since May when the board voted, not March. But it has been up on our website since May 2021. And so I also sent her a copy of the statute, which sets the fee. And so she responded back that she said, is there someone I can speak to about having this late fee waived? The late fee amount is absurdly high, and I should not be penalized for a glitch in your system. And again, she said the deadline was not clear, and the annual Connecticut fee to hold a CPA license in the state is already abnormally high. And then to impose an additional fee like this is egregious. Please let me know who can I speak to. So I explained again that she was not penalized by the glitch. It worked in her favor, because if it hadn't, she wouldn't have been able to renew at all. And so I told her that she, again, that this fee is based on the statute, but that she could write to you to request a fee waiver. So she submitted this waiver, and she stated, I am requesting a waiver of the $625 fee that was charged to me for renewing my CPA license. It was not clear to me that the CPE deadline was July 31st. I thought it was December 31st, given the COVID pandemic. I completed the required CPE credits by October 14th. So to charge a $625 late fee seems completely unnecessary and uncalled for. In addition, I was told that the system accepted my application for renewal in error. However, I was not notified until mid-December, giving me no time to pay such a large fee. So I just wanted to note that I wrote to her December 6th, not mid-December. And that, again, I explained that the glitch was not penalizing to her. And that I also wanted to note that she submitted evidence of some CPEs, but it wasn't a different last name. And so I went back to her, I said, who's this person? She said, oh, she changed her name due to marriage some while ago, but she never notified us, again, in violation of regulations.
So does she have any reason why she didn't get it on time?
To her name change?
No, the CPE. I mean,
No,
is there
just that
illness?
she thought it was December 31st.
Yeah, she stated in her letter, she said it wasn't clear to her.
Right.
Was there anything unclear about what was posted in May? Because
No.
outside of that, I'm not sure if there's any basis to really grant this waiver, given what's out there.
And she got the notice that it was after June, that because it was supposed to be June. So I'll make a motion to deny.
Can I
Second.
just,
Okay, Carla.
I
Carla?
wanted to ask a question, not second it. Were there other extensions to December the 31st around the time that of the earlier in the year communications, such that she might have mixed up the date and thought in good faith that the extension was to December the 31st?
Not that I'm aware of. I think that several people wrote that they were confused, but they just thought that the board would just automatically extend to December 31st again, like 2020. So they thought 2021 was going to be the same as 2020. That's the confusion part, but no, there's no other extensions at that time. And right after the board voted, we immediately put it on our website that the CPE extension was, granted until July 31st. And most people complied if they paid attention.
I think Bonnie put it out on the CTCPA news.
Oh. Okay, we have a motion. I don't believe we have a second on the table.
Not yet.
I'll second the motion to deny.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I
I'd like to
want to,
sympathize.
I
I'm sorry,
want
go ahead.
I want to abstain.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would sympathize with the amount of the fee does seem to be egregious, but that we don't set the fees.
Right.
So, okay, next.
Stephanie Fry, she requested for a complete waiver of the CPE, and her reason, she stated, with everything that has gone on with COVID past year, I lost my job and I have only recently started working again. My previous employer sponsored the courses and was willing to pay for them. After I lost my job, I could not afford them on my own. I have already spoken with my current employer and they are going to sponsor my CPE education going forward. I will have the CPE credits done prior to June 30th of 2020. Please accept this email as a formal apology for failing behind on this. It will not happen again.
Did you say 2020?
2022.
Oh, okay.
she didn't submit any documentation.
How much money are we talking about?
To take the test or for the fee? Of course, it's $625, but I really don't know how much, 40 credits of CPEs would cost.
Yeah, if you don't have any income, it's
Cost a lot.
Yeah.
a lot.
Are we,
Kind of sympathetic to this one because it's just the facts. No excuses. This is what I'm gonna do about it. I'm broke. Give me a
I
break.
just wanted to note that several other people have taken an affirmative step, which is they would try to switch to certificate to not to have to take the CPEs, and then when they find a job, they would, reinstate their license. And then
Yeah,
several, there are
I'm
people
kind
who
of
just pay.
surprised in a sense because it's a pretty onerous process to reinstate your license.
Actually, I'm not sure. All they would have to just submit the renewal license, but they would check a different box. And the only thing is I know that they have to mail it in instead of doing online.
yeah,
But they
catch
do,
up on it. I
they
think you
do
have to
have,
catch up on a lot of CPE too.
Right.
Yeah.
The difference being that instead of having to do the CPEs during the calendar year, well, during the CPE year, they would then have to have 40 credits. And during the 12-month period ending on the date that they submitted the application.
Right, which is what she can't do.
So Frank, what are the acceptable reasons for waiving a penalty?
Well, according to law, it's medical, military service, or other such good cause as the board may accept.
Could I make a motion to approve subject to her providing documentation?
If we say perhaps what documentation would be required.
Of the loss of a job and unemployment income?
Anybody else?
Did Marcia make a motion?
I did, that we approve it subject to documentation of the loss of income, the loss of a job plus unemployment.
Second.
I have a question. I'm sorry. What would be acceptable? Loss of a job during what time period? What if she worked most of the year and lost her job the last minute or beginning of the year?
Well, I think that most of us take our CPE in May and June, that even if she lost the job on April 30th, it would still make sense that
Whoop. Oh. Sorry, everybody froze on my screen for a second.
So what is she asking for, Kat? To just not
Complete
have to do
waiver.
of CPA?
oh, that's right. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. I would amend my motion that to say that give her an extension and not a complete waiver. An extension to June 30th.
I'll second the amended motion.
Guess I'm just trying to be practical, but now you're telling her she's gonna need to get 80 hours between now and June 30th, because she's gonna need 40 for last year and 40 for this year. So
The reason I thought that is that we very rarely tell someone they can go without anything.
Yeah.
So it'd be tough, but if her employer supports her,
Well, the effect of, if you deny her request, then basically her license would lapse. And she would not be able to reinstate until she completes her 40 CPE.
right? And she's got the timing on, so it seems like a pretty practical compromise, although there is obviously the practical problem of getting the full 80 hours in 6 months, but it seems to connect all the dots.
You could also extend her next TPE cycle for a few months if you don't want her to have to take 80 by June. But she didn't request for that.
Ani, what's out there as far as free CPE that you don't have to tell us where to get it but are there things out there that you can do a few hours? I thought that some of the larger firms had that.
You know that, I don't know if it's happening now, but a lot of times banks and insurance brokerages will offer free CPE to get you in the door.
Right.
You have to look a bit, but I don't
You
know
know, if
that many hours, but you can get some definitely.
if it comes out that the 80 hours tends to be a problem, she can come back for another bite at the apple. But this seems to, I think, a pretty fair address of her issue. Even if it does, I agree with you, Pete, it is a challenge, but. Well, I guess if there's no further discussion, unless Marcia wishes to amend her motion, I think we'll take a vote on it. All in favor? I'm voting.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Pete?
Okay. It's for the practical reason.
I just think it's a slippery slope when we start
Understood,
giving.
understood.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
so that I'm clear, the board just voted to give her an extension until June 30th to complete her
Right.
CPE.
Right. With
Thank
one
you.
opposed and I believe no abstentions.
The next person we have is Allison Menke. She requested an extension until December 5th for medical reason. She was short of 3.5 credits of ANA because she gave birth. She submitted a birth certificate to show the baby was born July 2nd.
I'll make a motion to approve.
So who's going to vote against apple pie?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Kat, what was the date?
December 5th.
It's an extension, correct?
Yes. The next person we have is Alpana Marwa. She's requested an extension until December 31st, based on the family's medical reason that I forwarded to you. And she
Make a
submitted a
motion.
doctor's note.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay.
What was her date? I don't have the documentation.
I'm sorry, December 31st. Next we have is Jonathan Phillips, and he's requesting a complete waiver of the CPE due to military reasons. He submitted a copy of the military order showing he is required to report for active duty on May 3rd, 2021 for a period of 371 days.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second,
Second. Any opposed? Motion carries.
The next person we have is Gabriel Sexay, and he's requesting an extension until December 17th for good cause. And he stated as follows: admittedly, I lost sight of completing my 40 hours of required CPE by the required deadline. However, last year has been the busiest year of my life, and I'm hoping that once I explain, you will agree that I qualify for a good cause extension and not have to pay the $625 late fee. This past year, I received a promotion and a new role at work that requires me to work 70 to 80 hours per week. Unfortunately, due to COVID, my now wife and I had to reschedule our entire wedding that was originally planned for the summer of 2020 to July 31st of 2021. After work and on weekends, we had to reschedule every aspect of our wedding, which was extremely time consuming. In addition to our wedding, we have had to attend 12 other weddings for close friends and family during the summer of 2021. In addition to being extremely busy with work and weddings, I had to put down my childhood dog last month, which was very emotional for me. I hope you can understand my situation and grant me this extension. Moving forward, I promise to complete CPEs in a timely manner. He is new, I'd say. His license was first issued in 2019, and he submitted no documents.
what did he request it be deferred to?
December 17th.
Despite being the mother of a bride that happened this year, that and knowing all the wedding stuff, if you had the time to attend 9 different weddings, that I wish I had that time. So I'm going to make a motion to deny.
Second,
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
aye.
Anybody opposed or abstain? The motion carries.
Next we have is Paul Casella. He came to you last November. At the time, he didn't, he requested for an extension until November 19th due to a good cause. His wife has a medical condition. At the time, he didn't submit documentation, so the board tabled his request. Right after, he provided the documentation, which I provided to you. What I didn't provide to you is 29 pages of my chart appointment history of her treatment.
Oh,
It went from January 21st to October 21st. There's a lot of medical appointments.
I'll make a motion to approve.
second,
Second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
aye.
Any
What was the
opposed?
date, please?
The date was November 19, 2021. Next to last we have is Olena Taran. She's requested until November 26, 2021. And basically she had to travel to the Ukraine to take care of her elderly parents, but her mom was in the hospital, unexpected illness. She submitted itinerary showing flights to the Ukraine on June 26, coming back July 15th. And she submitted her mother's hospital records in Ukrainian. She said she could translate it if we needed to. I told her to hold off for now. And so she's requested an extension until November 26th.
think I lost my train of thought on that one. So she was going because she was requesting because she was out of the country during critical dates.
Because she had to take care of her parents. So, for that. And then she also stated, besides the medical reason for like her parents' medical reason, she had to work a lot.
Do we know how many she had I mean, she didn't leave until June. Do we know how many she has now or had at that time?
No, we don't. She just said that, as you can see from my record, I never missed a deadline over 10 years since I got licensed in Connecticut, which was true. I did verify that. I had never missed a deadline over 10 years since I got my license, including during challenging 2020 pandemic year. And each year I had at least 7 to 10 extra carryovers. That's all she said. Based on my history, I'm requesting a waiver of $625 fee. Oh, I'm sorry, I do have that. She said I'm requesting a waiver of the fee for completing 8 CPE hours after July 31st. So she was missing only 8 hours after the deadline.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Sorry, I'm on mute half the time because the 2-year-old just showed up. Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstain? Motion carries.
So the last person we have is Chantal Liberté. She's requesting an extension until December 31st. She submitted medical records that she fell on June 25th, 2021. She injured her foot pretty badly. And so she was, for 8 weeks, she was on crutches, and doctors went extensively into like the condition of her foot. So I did verify her CPE record that she has been compliant since 2012. And she said that I had completed 70% of the requirement and was only short 12 credits as of July 31st.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
You're on mute,
Any
John.
further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries.
Thank you.
I thank everybody for going through a long, long slog today. And you didn't even throw in whether your dog died.
Oh, God.
Okay, is that it? So I guess at this point, it's any comments or concerns? And if anybody on the board would like to present any new business. Okay, hearing none. Well, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
I thought people would jump at that one today. A second?
I'll second.
Okay, no discussion allowed on a motion to adjourn, so we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh. Happy New Year, everyone. We are
Happy New
adjourned.
Year.
Likewise.
Thank you, everybody.
Happy
All right.
New
Happy New
Year.
Year,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye.